Trump just used one word to describe the Iranian government. That word moved markets. That word is the reason the ceasefire that was supposed to expire on Wednesday is still alive. And that word reveals something about the state of this war and the state of the peace that no mainstream news channel has connected clearly enough to what it means for your petrol prices and your energy bills. The word is fractured. Trump posted on Truth Social on Tuesday, based on the fact that the government of Iran is seriously fractured. We have been asked to extend the ceasefire until such time as their leaders and representatives can come up with a unified proposal. Seriously fractured, the ceasefire is extended, the naval blockade continues. Iran has not submitted a unified proposal. An Iranian senior advisor said the extension means nothing. Iran's UN envoy said he believes talks will happen, but only if the US ends its blockade first. China trading desk and in the Strait of Hormuz. The United States boarded a tanker carrying Iranian oil in the Indian Ocean. While Iran's semi-official Tasnim news agency said Iranian forces seized 2 ships in the strait. EY. Ceasefire extended, blockade continuing, ships being seized. A government Trump just publicly called seriously fractured. This is Geo Polity. This is episode 25. And today we are going to explain what seriously fractured actually means, why it is the most important phrase of the entire war, and exactly what it tells you about whether the next round of talks produces a deal or a resumption of full-scale conflict. Welcome back, 25 episodes, 54 days of war. If you are new here, subscribe now and start at episode 1. Because what you are about to hear sits on top of everything, this channel has been building since February the 28th. Let us start with Trump's word. Because fractured, specifically seriously fractured, is not throwaway language from a president who chooses his words carefully on Truth Social. U.S. officials have suspected there was a significant divide between Iran's negotiating team, led by Parliament Speaker Ghalibaf and Foreign Minister IRGC, and the country's military leaders in the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, leading to questions about who can ultimately sign off on a deal. Informosio. We covered this in episode 18 weeks ago. We told you then that Iran effectively has 2 governments. A civilian government willing to negotiate, an IRGC military council running the war independently. And that the gap between them was the central unresolved structural fact of the entire diplomatic process. Trump just confirmed that assessment publicly, and he confirmed it because it is why Islamabad failed. 21 hours of direct talks, inches from a memorandum of understanding. And then Vance left without a deal, because the Iranian negotiating team in the room could not make commitments that the IRGC military council back in Tehran would honor. That is not a negotiating problem. That is a constitutional problem inside the Iranian state. And it is a problem that no amount of American pressure, no blockade, no bomb threat, no whole civilization will die language, can solve from the outside. Only one thing can bridge a fractured Iranian government, and that thing is time. Time for the internal argument inside Tehran between the civilian moderates who want a deal and the IRGC hardliners who want to keep fighting to produce a winner. Time for whichever faction controls the supreme leader's ear to consolidate its position and issue a mandate that the other faction cannot override. Unnamed U.S. officials told multiple news outlets that the extension reflected divisions in opinion among Iran's leadership, as well as trouble communicating with injured Supreme Leader Mujtaba Khamenei. Informosio. Trouble communicating with an injured Supreme Leader. That is the detail that has received almost no coverage, and that explains more about the current state of negotiations than any diplomatic communiqué. Iran's Supreme Leader, installed in the rushed aftermath of his father's death in the American and Israeli strikes of February the 28th, is injured. His ability to receive information, process it, and issue clear directives to both the IRGC and the civilian government is compromised. The Iranian chain of command is not just fractured politically. It is fractured physically. The man at the top of the system is not fully functional. And the two powerful factions below him, the negotiators who went to Islamabad and the generals who kept firing missiles after the ceasefire, are both trying to fill that vacuum. This is why the ceasefire has been repeatedly violated by both sides, while both sides simultaneously claim to support it. This is why Iran's 10-point proposal cannot be turned into a unified response. This is why Vance left Islamabad after 21 hours with nothing. Not because Iran does not want a deal, but because Iran cannot currently produce a unified decision on what deal it will accept. There is a way forward if the United States agrees to pare down its immediate demands to focus on the most important issue confronting the world, the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Because both countries are now complicit in keeping the strait closed, neither one will lose face by opening it as long as the other one does the same. EY. Read that again. Both countries are complicit in keeping the strait closed. The U.S. is blockading Iranian ports. Iran is still preventing commercial traffic from moving freely. Neither side can open the strait first without appearing to capitulate. But if both sides agree to open it simultaneously, neither loses face. Both can claim they acted on their own terms. And the global economy gets the relief it has been desperate for since February the 28th. That single insight, both sides open the strait simultaneously. Framing it as a parallel decision rather than a concession may be the key that unlocks the entire negotiation. It is the kind of creative ambiguity that has resolved the most intractable diplomatic standoffs in modern history. Oslo, the Cuban Missile Crisis back channel, the original 2015 nuclear deal. The question is whether the fractured Iranian government can produce the unified decision necessary to take that step. And whether it can do so before Trump's patience, which has already been tested by 3 ceasefire deadlines and a failed round of direct talks, runs out entirely. Now let us talk about what is actually happening in the Strait of Hormuz today. Because while diplomats are debating proposals and extensions, the physical reality in the strait has become genuinely alarming. Iranian forces targeted 3 container ships, seizing 2 and firing on a third. According to global security monitors and the IRGC, this happened while the ceasefire was technically in effect, while Trump was announcing the extension, while Pakistan's prime minister was thanking Trump for buying more time for diplomacy. Iran seized 2 ships and fired on a third during a ceasefire it nominally supports. That is the fractured government in action. The civilian foreign minister is in contact with his Saudi and Qatari counterparts talking about peace and responsible diplomacy. The IRGC naval forces in the Strait are seizing container ships. Both things are happening simultaneously because the 2 entities are not coordinating. Because the supreme leader who would coordinate them is injured. Because seriously fractured is not just a Trump talking point. It is the operational reality of Iranian governance right now. The ships being seized are not Iranian ships. They are commercial vessels, cargo ships carrying goods for companies and consumers around the world. Every ship seized in the Strait is a reminder to every shipping company, every insurer, every cargo owner that the Strait of Hormuz is not yet safe. And an unsafe strait means elevated insurance premiums. Elevated premiums mean elevated shipping costs. Elevated shipping costs mean elevated prices for everything that arrives by sea. Disruption to global oil supplies from the Iran war has added more than $100 to the price of long-haul flights from Europe, a cost likely to trigger higher ticket prices. The rise in jet fuel prices has increased the average fuel cost by $104 for each passenger on long-haul flights leaving Europe. A flight from Barcelona to Berlin costs $31 more per passenger in fuel. A long-haul trip from Paris to New York costs $152 more in fuel. China Trading Desk. Your holiday, your business trip, your family visit more expensive. Not because of demand. Because of a war in the Strait of Hormuz that has lasted 54 days, and that today produced a ceasefire extension with no end date and no clear mechanism for closing the gap. Now let us talk about the Lebanon dimension, because it remains the most consequential unresolved element of the entire peace architecture, and it took a step forward this week that deserves attention. Israel and Lebanon agreed to an uneasy truce for 10 days on April 16th at the urging of President Trump and the United States. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is expected to join a second round of direct talks between Israel and Lebanon this Thursday at the State Department. China Trading Desk. The talks are set to be the first direct official talks between the two countries since 1983. Time 43 years. Israel and Lebanon have not had direct official diplomatic engagement in 43 years. And those talks are happening this week in Washington. This matters because Iran's most important condition for a permanent settlement is that Lebanon be included. Iran cannot accept a peace deal that ends the bombing of Iranian territory while the bombing of Lebanon, conducted by Israel with American backing, continues. The civilian Iranian government has said this explicitly. The IRGC has acted on it, resuming missile fire after Israeli strikes in Lebanon. If the Israel-Lebanon talks in Washington produce a framework, even an imperfect, partial one, it removes the biggest obstacle that the Iranian civilian government faces in selling any deal to its domestic audience. Because it can say the Lebanese resistance was not abandoned. The war ended for everyone, not just for Iran. Whether Netanyahu's government, which has pursued the maximalist objective of Hezbollah's permanent destruction, can accept a Lebanon framework that leaves Hezbollah intact as a political force is the central question of this week's Washington talks. Let us now talk about what all of this means for where you actually stand today. Because the purpose of every episode of this series is not just to explain the news. It is to answer the question that every viewer is asking when they arrive at the petrol station, when they open their energy bill, when they book a flight. When does this end, and when do the prices come down? The honest answer based on everything we know today is this. The ceasefire extension buys time, but time without a direction is just delay. The fractured Iranian government needs to consolidate around a unified position. That process is being driven by internal Iranian politics that no American threat can accelerate and no Pakistani mediator can substitute for. It will take as long as it takes. Trump has given Iran 3 to 5 days to engage in negotiations and resolve alleged infighting within the government before resuming attacks. GZRO media that window is now. The next 3 to 5 days will determine whether the second round of talks happens before Trump's patience expires. If the second round happens and produces the simultaneous Hormuz opening framework, oil begins to fall toward 85. Your petrol bill starts its slow, gradual, months-long decline. Your flights get cheaper, your grocery bills ease at the margin. If the internal Iranian process stalls, if the IRGC hardliners continue to override the civilian negotiators, if the injured supreme leader cannot produce a clear mandate, if 3 to 5 days pass without a unified Iranian proposal, Trump resumes the bombing. The ceasefire ends, and everything that this series has been warning about since episode 1 becomes the new baseline. The fractured government of Iran is not just a political curiosity or a diplomatic obstacle. It is the single most important variable in whether the next chapter of this story is a peace deal or a second phase of war. And it is a variable that neither Trump nor Vance nor Pakistan nor China can control. Only Iran can resolve it. 25 episodes, 54 days. And the outcome still turns on the internal politics of a government that a sitting U.S. president just publicly called seriously fractured on Truth Social. That is where we are. Geo Polity will be here for every development of the next 3 to 5 days. We will cover the second round of talks if it happens. We will cover the resumption of bombing if it does not. We will connect every development to your bills, your prices, and the world your family is living in. Like this video right now, if these 25 episodes have given you something real. Subscribe and turn on every notification The next development could come within hours. And share this video with everyone trying to understand why the ceasefire was extended, what seriously fractured actually means, and whether their petrol prices are about to go up or down. Comment below, do you think Iran can produce a unified proposal in 3 to 5 days? Do you think Trump is genuinely willing to wait? Where in the world are you watching from, and what are your energy prices doing this week? We read everything, 3 to 5 days. This is Geo Polity. Stay informed. Stay analytical, and we will see you in the next one.